The pit door slammed shut behind me, before I even understood what I was looking at, and the sound alone made my hands go cold. Something big moved in the dark below the platform. I heard claws scrape against metal, a low wet hiss, and then a shape the size of a small truck rose into the light. Armored plates. 6 curved legs, eyes like black glass set into a skull built for tearing things apart. The whole room went quiet except for my own breathing. I am Nathan Cole, science attaché for the human delegation, and I had just been invited to watch the Vraxu Compact show, off the one thing they were most proud of in the entire galaxy. Their fear. The Vraxu ambassador, a tall gray-skinned being named Torvek, stood beside the containment glass with his arms crossed, clearly enjoying my reaction. His translator device buzzed out words in a flat, amused tone. "This is the Kravinoth," he said. "The deadliest creature our people have ever documented. It has ended entire expeditions, killed hundreds of our strongest soldiers. Even we do not approach it without full battle armor. You wish to know what true danger looks like, human. Now you know." I stared through the reinforced glass at the creature pacing back and forth, its claws leaving deep scratches in solid alloy. Every part of me understood I was supposed to feel small right now. Torvek wanted me shaking. He wanted a story to tell his people about the day the soft new species finally learned real fear. Instead, I noticed something else. The shell pattern, the size of those legs, the way the tail curled when it moved. It looked like a lobster the size of a delivery van. Behind me, my colleague Ellie Marsh leaned close and whispered, "Nathan, is it just me, or does that thing look edible?" I almost laughed out loud, right there in front of the alien delegation, and had to bite it back hard. That night, back on our ship, word had already spread through the crew. Everyone had seen the recordings from the observation deck, and instead of fear, I heard something else spreading through the mess hall. Curiosity, jokes. Someone had already pulled up an image of the Kravinoth next to a picture of snow crab legs, and was showing it around like a menu item. Our ship's cook, a broad-shouldered man named Dylan Pierce, was standing at the center of it all with his arms folded, studying the image with the serious focus of a man solving a puzzle. "You know," he said slowly, "if you crack that shell right, there's gotta be a lot of meat in there." The room erupted into laughter, but underneath the jokes, I could tell people were actually thinking about it. Really thinking about it. Captain Renata Alvarez called me to the bridge an hour later. She did not look amused. "The Vraxu delegation wants a formal response tomorrow," she said. "They expect us to admit that their creature terrifies us. That's the whole point of the demonstration, Nathan. They want us scared, so the treaty negotiations tilt in their favor. Fear makes people agree to bad terms." "I understand," I said. "But Captain, permission to speak freely?" She raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "I don't think we should give them fear," I said. "I think we should give them something they've never seen before." She studied me for a long moment, then leaned back in her chair. "You have something in mind," I told her. She stared at me like I had lost my mind, and then, slowly, a smile crept across her face. The next morning, our delegation returned to the station with a very unusual request. We did not ask to study the Kravinoth. We did not ask to test its intelligence or observe its hunting patterns. We asked for something the Vraxu translator device seemed to struggle with entirely. We asked to eat one. Torvik blinked at me for a full 10 seconds before responding. "You wish to consume the Kravinoth." "That's correct," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, the way you would discuss a trade agreement. Not the live specimen, of course. We understand it holds cultural and defensive value to your people. But your records mention specimens that die naturally or are put down after becoming too aggressive for containment. We would like to harvest one of those. The room of Vraxu diplomats went into a hushed, rapid conversation in their own language, glancing at us like we had just suggested something deeply strange. Which to them, we had. Torvek eventually turned back to me, his expression somewhere between confusion and disbelief. "You want to eat the thing that kills us," he said. "We want to understand it," I said. "And if it happens to be food, then yes." There was a long pause. Then Torvek did something I did not expect. He laughed, a short barking sound through his translator, and said, Fine. You may have the specimen we destroyed 3 days ago. Its body is still in storage. If your people wish to make a spectacle of themselves, I will not stop you. In fact, I would very much like to watch." Word spread through the station fast. By the time our crew arrived at the storage bay to collect the massive shelled body, a small crowd of Vraxu officials, station workers, and even a few traders from other species had gathered to watch. Nobody wanted to miss this. Dylan took one look at the enormous creature laid out on the transport platform and grinned like a kid on his birthday. "All right," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's get to work." What followed was, in my honest opinion, one of the strangest and most entertaining afternoons of my life. We hauled the Kravinoth back to our ship's cargo bay, where the crew had already rigged up a set of large containers and portable heating units, borrowed from the engineering deck, and definitely not originally designed for cooking. Dylan directed the operation like a general leading an army, calling out instructions while our engineer, a quick-witted woman named Priya Nair, rigged a makeshift crane system to help move the shell sections once they were cut apart. Cracking the outer plating took real effort. The shell was thick, almost like armor plating on a small vehicle, and it took 2 crew members working together with heavy tools just to open the first section. But once they broke through, the smell that came out surprised everyone. Rich, briny, almost sweet, like the best parts of crab and lobster combined into something new. "Oh, that's good," Dylan muttered, almost to himself. "That is really, really good." Word had spread even further by then, and the observation windows above the cargo bay were packed with onlookers. Vraxu diplomats stood shoulder to shoulder with station traders, all watching in stunned silence as human crew members pulled steaming chunks of meat from the shell of the galaxy's most feared predator and dropped them into pots of boiling water seasoned with whatever spices the ship's kitchen had on hand. Torvek stood at the front of the crowd, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I walked up beside him, holding a small tray with a few pieces of cooked meat, steam still rising off them. "Would you like to try some?" I asked. He looked at me like I had just offered him a piece of the sun. "You want me to eat it," he said. "I want you to understand it," I said, echoing his own words back at him. "That's what we do. We don't just fear the things that could hurt us. We learn everything about them. Sometimes that means turning them into dinner." For a long moment, nobody in the crowd moved. Then, slowly, Torvek reached out and took a piece from the tray. He studied it, sniffed it, and finally, with the entire station watching, took a bite. His eyes went wide. "This is," he paused, chewing slowly, searching for the right word through his translator. "This is remarkable." The crowd erupted into noise, a mix of shocked gasps and nervous laughter from the other species watching, and within minutes, a line had formed. Vraxu officials who had spent their entire lives fearing this creature were suddenly asking for seconds. Traders from 3 different species were requesting samples to bring home. Someone even asked Dylan for the recipe, and he happily started explaining seasoning ratios like he was hosting a cooking show. By evening, the mood on the station had shifted completely. The fear that Torvek had wanted to build around his species' apex predator had transformed into something else entirely: curiosity, respect, and a very real appetite. Captain Alvarez found me standing near the cargo bay, watching the last of the crowd disperse with satisfied expressions and small containers of leftovers tucked under their arms. "Well," she said, "I think that went better than expected." "I think we accidentally started a new trade industry," I said. She laughed. "The council is already drawing up terms. Turns out the Vraxu are very interested in a long-term agreement now. Something about harvesting rights and seasoning exports." The treaty negotiations the next day went smoother than anyone had predicted. Torvek, once cold and calculating, greeted me almost warmly, and the tone of the entire meeting had changed. There was no more talk of who was tougher, who feared what, or who ranked higher on some invisible scale of danger. Instead, the conversation moved toward cooperation, toward shared resources, toward mutual respect, built on something neither species had expected. Before I left the station, Torvek approached me one final time. "I must ask," he said, "are all humans like this? Do you turn every danger into something so ordinary?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "We don't like being afraid. I said. So we find ways to make the scary things useful instead. Sometimes that means fighting them. Sometimes it means studying them. And sometimes, I glanced back toward the cargo bay, where Dylan was already packing extra containers of seasoning for the trip home. It just means finding out how good they taste with butter. Torvik stared at me for a long moment, then let out another one of his short, barking laughs. I think, he said, your species is going to be very interesting to know. As our ship pulled away from the station, I stood at the observation window and watched the lights of the Vraxu colony fade into the distance. Somewhere behind us, an entire species was rewriting generations of fear into something entirely different. And somewhere in our own cargo hold, Dylan was already testing a new sauce recipe for the next diplomatic dinner. I never thought the story of humanity's first real test in the wider galaxy would end with a seafood boil. But looking back, maybe that was exactly the point. The fastest way to earn respect from the stars was never about proving how hard you could fight. It was about proving you were never really afraid to begin with.